Hello to everyone, wherever you are on the planet, joining us here today for Global Minnesota's Spring 2021 SDG Roundtable. 4 times a year, we gather as a community of people concerned about and working towards the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the targets for the 2030 deadline. And each session, each of our roundtables, we are focusing on learning from each other how the SDGs are being incorporated into our work, our daily lives, and also the partnerships. We pay a lot of attention to the 17th Sustainable Development Goals partnerships as well. This event is brought to you by the members and contributors who have made Global Minnesota one of the largest and oldest World Affairs Councils in the country. For you who are watching, who are our members, thank you so much for your support and contributions. You make these kinds of free events possible for everyone on the planet. If you'd like more information about Global Minnesota, to get on our email list to know about other events coming up, please just go to our website, globalminnesota.org. Next month in July, we'll have a special SDG program hearing from the University of Minnesota, who's been dramatically increasing their activity in this area, and that'll be exciting to get that update. Also later this month, and June 23rd, we'll have our special global conversations at noon, looking at Persian Gulf security as part of our Great Decisions program. We are looking at a number of key international topics, and that's one of them. It'll be a very special program. I also want to call your attention to Global Minnesota's upcoming June 18th gala. We're celebrating our 70th year. Things are a little different in an all Zoom environment, but we are really excited about reviewing some of the history. How did Minnesota get to be so global minded? Where did Global Minnesota come from? And to look ahead, to look at the next 70 years and beyond. So today's program is part of a kind of a commitment that we make to our mission of advancing international understanding and engagement. We specialize in connecting Minnesotans to the world and the world to Minnesota. So today is going to be one of those special days for some pretty special connections. Many of you watching are familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. Perhaps for some of you it's brand new, but it's a set of 17 goals that have been agreed by all the world leaders back in 2015. And what was unique was that they were goals that everyone was committing to reach for, and they came with some very specific targets, very specific things that would be accomplished by the 2030 deadline, the 15-year deadline. SDG 3, as we sometimes say it, the Sustainable Development Goal number 3, good health and well-being to all at all ages. It's the one that focuses on issues related to health and to wellness and to well-being. And SDG 3 is also the theme that's been chosen by the public-private partnership here in Minnesota that's working to bring a World Expo or World's Fair to Minnesota, specifically on that health and wellness goal in the summer of 2027. Within that goal, SDG 3.6 focuses on a very, very important issue, a global, a worldwide issue, reducing injuries and deaths due to car crashes, to road crashes, by half by 2030. And for some of us in our lives, this is very personal. In our own life experience, we've suffered or we've lost a family member. And sometimes tragedies in our lives bring us to a kind of activism, civic engagement. And sometimes that civic engagement can be felt and seen and impact the global. And that's what's going to be special about today's program. My good friend Vijay Dixit is a person who's created the Shreya R. Dixit Foundation. You'll be hearing more about the foundation. And Vijay and I have had the good friendship and partnership in understanding how some of the passions that we have for changing our society fit into the global goals that our leaders have agreed that we're going to all work together to achieve by 2030. Welcome to Global Minnesota's SDG Roundtable, Vijay Dixit, and I'm turning the microphone over to you.
Thank you very much, Mark, for the great contribution that you are making to this world, and also for a very kind invitation that you provided and gave me to offer my take on this issue that you just referred to, and also make me open to discuss this in a very open forum, which is global. And I'm so pleased and honored to be part of this roundtable. And if I may ask Carolina to please bring my PowerPoint. Thank you. All right. There you are. So as you see, the name of the topic is tragedy to advocacy and an SDG 3.6 connection. Yes, pretty interesting. Next slide. And the very first thing that I would definitely like to do now is set up the whole talk, whole 20 or so minutes that I have here. Why I'm here. And what I'm here to do those things which are in the board. I want to discuss an architecture and what I have done with the SDGs and related activities. And also I'm going to demonstrate a model which describes this architecture and how I may like to go down to the level of SDG 3.6. Mark mentioned 50% of reduction worldwide traffic fatalities between 15 and 30. And of course, I'm going to describe my past journey. And I'm calling it a metaphorical statement because it's a sharp needle that pierces through tragedy first and then advocacy later. And now the future travels drilling through the SDGs 0.6 and beyond. But at the same time, may I request the audience, this esteemed audience, to please question me, critique me for what I presented. You know, it's very true that I have my hypotheses, I have my feelings, comments, opinions, but you might not agree with it. So I would like to hear that. And as I said, the needle in my story, as you know, that is the needle. The needle is my story. And the thread is Shreya Foundation. And the hands moving that threaded needle is the hands of distraction-free life clubs that we formed, which I described. Safety experts, corporations, policymakers, and members of law enforcement and community at large that has helped me. And one particular category of individuals that I have not included in here, which I represent, are the grieving parents, grieving families of those who have lost. And next slide, what I'm saying is, you know, that is true, but everything starts with a story. Every advocacy starts with a story. Mine is a little bit different because it starts with a tragedy. Next slide. And this is a personal tragedy that befell us on the 1st of November. My daughter Shreya was coming home, took a ride from University of Wisconsin, where she was an international business student in the sophomore year, just 6 weeks into the sophomore year, But what happened was the girl who was driving got distracted and crashed the car. On the side, Shreya was sitting on, that was the front passenger. There were 3 others in the car besides Shreya, but all the weight of the car hit Shreya bad, and we lost her. The other 3, fortunately, walked out of a raised car from the other doors. So that is the tragedy. But when I look at this tragedy thing, I started to look around. And next slide shows that, my God, it is not my tragedy alone. It's a national tragedy. You know, in the year 2007, we lost Shreya. 510 Minnesotans died on roads. Total of 42,000, 41,000 plus died in the United States. As if that was not enough, 558 US traffic crashes occur between 2007 and 2020, just 13 years. Approximately, that is about 4,000 a year, 3,500 a year. 34, 33 die every month. You know, 9/11, close to 3,000. So more than a 9/11 plays every month in this country. Take, for instance, we live in Minnesota. Minnesota has already lost 167. Compare that to 2020, when we lost just 117 on this day. This is sad. Things are not improving. May I have the next slide, please? So it is not just the grief that causes it. It is not the grief alone. It causes literally lots of other things. I'm going to show you the dollar amount. 2020 was $474.4 billion lost only in the United States. Estimated number of non-fatal injuries here was about 4-point-something million. That is insane. And of course, these are cost issues, dollar. How about the immeasurable pain, suffering, emotional, blackouts and burnouts that people like me suffer? But I'm still a fortunate person because I'm able to stand in front of you and talk about it. There's so many others, in fact, thousands of others throughout the world who can't even get out of their beds in the morning. And as if United States is not, let's go to the next slide and see what's going on in the rest of the world. 1.3 billion die in road crashes every year. Okay, that makes it 37 a day. So we are playing internationally 9/11 a day. That is insanity. This must stop. This must stop. And also an interesting thing that I feel this audience must know. Many of you are from outside the United States, and we are more focused on the inside. But you will notice 60% of the victims are pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists. Actually, in the United States, majority of the crashes are now, some of them are going up. Majority of them are automobile or truck accidents or crashes. Whereas if you go to some of the third world countries, even developing countries, and then some advanced countries where a lot of bicyclists go on the road, pedestrians, there's more walking and more cycling. With that said, I'll give you one simple example. India is my motherland, a mother birth country. My motherland now is United States for so many years. But in India, many years ago, I went to India and they told me in a newspaper clipping that with every car crash, there are 10 outside that particular car who get impacted. So for one automobile accident, there are 10 who die. I don't know what to do. And then financial costs in many of the countries at 2 to 8% of their GDP. Let's go to the next slide. And, all after looking at this, which I'm seeing for such a long time, but in 2007, 2008, those were our formative years. That's when we started, my God, we need to do something about this, because a teenager was responsible for the crash. Shreya herself was teenager. So I thought, let's work on teenagers. And then I started to look at some data, and I found out that 60%, 62% of these very teenagers, who form about 26% of all crashes, are daydreaming. By daydreaming, I'm not saying that looking at the text or doing something else. They had a fight with a girlfriend, and they said that, oh, what is she going to do, and what should I do? I'm not going to talk to her. In that process, you cause a crash. So that daydreaming is a very kind of a loaded word here. That's why I put that in parentheses. So this is how the foundation started in 2008, and Shreya was reborn. And we turned it into a 501c3 charity, so we can, do something extra and transform the driving culture in this country. Next slide, Kaila. So now, with that resolve, I have to tell you that, well, this is the 14th year, actually, of the foundation's birth. So I have to tell you the chronology of how we worked. 2008, talks at high schools, driver ed program. Yeah, I started to meet people and things like that. But then just a small thing there in the third line, COVID did not deter us even in 2020. So that's good. And then we started to, in 2013, we started to do leverage technologies. I worked with a hypermedia lab, former executive director at MIT, to actually design and produce and then release a free online MOOC application, which is massive open online courses. It's a very adaptive type of a instrument that we created, and that is on our website, and give you more details about that. And it can be even automatically translated into 65 world languages. Let's go beyond 2013 to my next slide. And that is the 2016, and that's where we started to develop some long-term strategy. The previous one was like a foundational teething problems and whatnot. And I started to write a book because I had enough now in the last 7-8 years. I had developed enough knowledge about grief and how to deal with it. So I authored a book, One Split Second. Not only try to describe the problem, but more focused on the data and solutions. And then I was so fortunate to have the pleasure of engaging with our US Senator, Amy Klobuchar, starting right in 2009 when she invited me to the first distracted driving summit in Washington, DC, in the presence of Secretary of State Ray LaHood, who hosted that conference. And then in that book, as I said, I want to fix it, not brood over it, grieve over it. So I proposed a model for instilling distraction-free driving behaviors with a peer-to-peer influence model. Now, that was created for teens. Next slide, please. But we can always apply to, without any difficulty, to others. So then after that, 2016 to 2019 was the strategy execution. We were taking off. And then we turned that into a model, what I call the educate, incentivize, act strategy. We educate people with a lot of stuff, a lot of talks and books and whatnot. And then we incentivize monetarily, as well as through some engagement, some visits with the senator, visit with some other conferences, give talks to conferences, those kinds of things. And then we act on those strategies by engaging these kids, these teenager kids, to create solutions. And those solutions are then distributed through their peer-to-peer influence program. And so what I did was that it started to mobilize high school students in, I think, 2015, I would say. That's when we do it. But by 2016, we were pretty ready to do it. And then later on, started to even collaborate with the University of Minnesota and even developed another program, Drivers in Making, for little kids, elementary school students, where again, the peer-to-peer influence went at a different level. Those peers were teenagers and they were influencing their younger peers, elementary school students. So we had these older students mentoring young students. And then came 2020 COVID. COVID came to us with a fury. Next slide, please. And did not let COVID derail foundation plans. Journey continued. Foundation distraction-free life clubs went on steroids. They designed this program that I'm so proud to now talk about, 6-week summer training, summer internship program for students from all over the country. We had 70 applications. We had just 10 internships, but the foundation allowed me to offer 20. So we had 20 students last year during the peak of COVID attack, working on interesting, very enjoyable program. Enjoy is a very kind of a mild expression. They were ecstatic about this program because these kids were not getting any summer jobs in that COVID era. And so it became so popular that leaders of those internships, the two big leaders were our former alumni of these clubs. They were in the senior year of their college years, and they still kept engaged with us, kept very actively in the foundation. So they administered the whole 6-week program. Under them were the recently graduated seniors who had also gone to college. 4 of them decided to actually become the intern leaders. And then we had interns from all over the country, creating marketing plans, creating blogs, creating podcast channels, and then creating all sorts of videos and graphics, you name it. And of course, they did a lot of work and we paid them worth the money that we spent on them. And the program became so popular and got some attention at the Department of Public Safety, where in 2020, in the middle of that COVID attack, these 4 of these kids, they received the Emerging Leaders Award, who managed those internships in a virtual award ceremony. Year-long internships now are on the board because they became so popular for the summer, and that now in 2021, our second internship program, summer internship programs, starts on 15th of June, right after the schools have ended, and they'll go for 6 weeks. And that's actually very, very comforting and very meaningful for us. Next slide, please. Now, one thing happened here. What happened? My friend Mark started to tell me more about this strategic, sustainable defense. Oh my God, I'm so sorry that I have a typo here. Navigating the SDG is SDG landscape. I apologize. So Mark started to kind of tell me about these sustainable development goals created by United Nations. So I started to read through. I said, oh my God, this is unbelievable. So what I started to do was that let me look at the one that applies to us, and which is of course this talk 3.6. But then I think we have to pass through strategic sustainable development goal 17, centering the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. I could identify this first one, although they have very many subtasks, stakeholder partnership and voluntary commitments and technology. Those are the areas that I had actually a lot of work accomplished during the last 14 years. So I thought that I could help out on that. So I am still a student of sustainable development goals. And pardon me, I keep calling it strategic, but I think sustainable, strategic, both are actually in there. So SDGs now, I felt SDG 17 was very important for us. So I started to share with others. I started to read more on it. And so I'm still a student learning more. It's a treasure. And then also in the United Nations SDG site, you see this, there is what they call the National Sustainable Development Strategies. And those are also very meaningful, very, very, very kind of bright. And I could identify 13, that is the second one is 13, I missed that, and SDG 16. These are the ones that fall under what I have been doing, and I would like to talk to my friends on this call and others to explore. So what do I do next? And that is the next slide. So what we started to do was, and this is still part of the journey, it ended in 2020, but it continued beyond that. And now 21 and beyond, what do we do? So let's enhance SDG 3.6 at the foundation, expand and reach out to active SDG networks outside of Minnesota or maybe abroad, and engage those networks in actually one-on-one interactive conversations. So we could transfer foundations learning to them, and they learn from us, critique us, and we get to a higher level of intelligence. So I'm very proud of those forum, and one of this forum, I'm really very, very grateful to Mark for getting me in front of supporters of SDGs. So let's keep going to the next slide now. And here we have, this is more like, vision type of a thing. So start joint youth mentorships across all SDGs. We have done so much in that field. So other SDGs, even outside of the 3.6, would be very happy to work with us, and I would like to talk to them. Another thing that we want to do inside the foundation is map, or maybe even work with external SDGs, map it down, not from the top level, drill down to the lower levels. Like 3.6 is a lower level, but then we have to keep going down and down to come to an actionable level where we can develop some actions, measurable metrics, which will then push up to the ultimate primary goal of 3.6. And of course, always ready to collaborate with my friends across the SDG arena. And this SDG has been chronically used instead of SDG, and I'm very sorry for that. So let's go to the next one. Next one is a little bit different, little bit difficult. So all of these things are coming. Mark, do we have 3 more minutes or no?
Yes, there's some questions, but we certainly have 3 more minutes. Keep going.
Shreya loved to sing. Music was her energy. We could hear her singing throughout the house, in every room. She was a soprano and the only 6th grader in the high school choir. That's when I felt, my God, this girl has something in her. The day she passed away, Shreya was coming home with some other girls. The driver was reaching out for something and got distracted. That split second, she crashed right into a cement pylon. The other 3 in the car did not get hurt, but my daughter was lost. Shreya was killed under circumstances which were totally preventable. And that's the sad thing. I have no way of knowing what she would have been. A business executive, a great singer. We will never know that. That's very painful.
Every time I breathe, every time I'm dreaming in my bed, 7 days a week, thinking of the words that I once said till I still wake up wishing I could just move on. Tell myself I'm okay, I did it all wrong. That day comes back to me every time I breathe. Every time I breathe.
Cargill, which has been a global leader, a very, very powerful global leader.
Yes.
And that coalition that you constructed was able to successfully get a bipartisan group of state legislators to finally move on distracted driving legislation. We were way behind other states. But there was something in the way that you were able to place it in that global context. Hey, we've all agreed, reducing road crashes, deaths, and injuries by half.
Yes.
And all of the safety people were saying to you, if we pass this legislation and if companies have these policies, there will be less distracted driving and there will be less deaths, therefore contributing to the SDGs. And in my mind, this ability to link social change passion in the global context, because people all over the planet are working on these issues, this seems to me to be one of the powerful things that Minnesota uniquely can bring in, that you and all of the people active on your board and the interns able to do. Can you speak to our audience just about the experience that you've had in bringing these big partners into this more global perspective?
Yes. Oh, thank you for asking. That's a very, very good query. Actually, I probably in one of the slides, I did say that what we did was initially, because of Senator Klobuchar that came on board in 2009, and that was very early on. So through her, I was able to actually engage meet with some of the people, and then she brought in a little bit exposure to a very, infant foundation. And at that particular time, Mark, you would remember that in 2008, 2009, distracted driving was not a household name. It was a tongue twister. And at that time, it was not getting much focus. But because of some of the people we fortunately met in the very beginning, we were able to engage them through what we call a Raksha walk that we do every year. It's a awareness 5K that we do here in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. And Senator Klobuchar came. And then a year later, you came. At that time, you were the Secretary of State of the state of Minnesota. And then you brought in your story. Now, these two individuals actually expanded out in the way that, oh, Mark Ritchie went there, Senator Klobuchar went there, who's this guy? So we started to talk to different people. And then I got involved with Minnesota Safety Council, to their Towards Zero Death programs. And this is how it expanded. And that brought a lot of the local corporation, AAA, initially even AT&T's It Can Wait campaign. I was part of that. And the very first time AT&T did that what was that? It Can Wait campaign. The president of AT&T Minnesota was very nice to have offered his Fiat, was it Fiat, or it was a Ford car, Ford Focus, and they had installed a simulator in there. And he shipped it from another state to our third walk, and people played with it, and it became extremely popular. And after that, we got, exposure, and then Federated Insurance Company, Minnesota Safety Council, National Safety Council, and Cargill was a big one. When they started to talk to us, they even offered to hold roundtable for us. And that was in the year 2018. That's when I was trying to work with the legislatures and lawmakers on the distraction-free, hands-free law in the state. And Senator Klobuchar again came to speak to us, and there were three, four executives from different parts of the corporate, and then Minnesota Safety Council, some other legislatures, and you, my friend, you moderated that session at Cargill Corporation's headquarters. And that became popular. And after that, Traveler noticed us and they came in. And this is how this grew. And during our conversations with the legislatures, they asked me to lead some of these activities, and I did. And we talked to committees, and at the end of it, when Governor Walz, 2 years later, it took us 2 years of really acting, lobbying on behalf of the grieving families. We brought 30, 40 grieving families to all the committees. And that was too much for these legislatures to say no to us. And then I was very fortunate to be invited by Governor Walz to introduce him at the signing ceremony of the hands-free law. And so this is the whole story. I gave you a long-ended answer, but this is how it has evolved. But then, Mark, the evolution never stops.
Yes, and I remember that when Amy Klobuchar came in after she was elected senator, and she came,
Yes.
her second year, she brought North Dakota Republican Senator Hovland, a
Yeah.
very good friend of hers, somebody who cared deeply, and he was blown away by the event. I remember they were traveling and they got off the plane here and then came to the walk.
Yes.
But that was always the case, that certain things are definitely nonpartisan and their political approach can be bipartisan. And Cargill assembled in that workshop, in that symposium, the state legislators from both parties necessary to get something done.
Exactly.
And to me, this is where we need to be with the Sustainable Development Goals. We need dealing with the climate crisis to be nonpartisan. We need everybody.
Yes.
We need all of these issues, whether it's zero hunger or good health. And so there's an aspect of building into our Sustainable Development Goals, working groups, and our roundtables, the notions that things that affect people's lives and personal that really deeply are the things that can help us get across some other barriers, because we're never going to agree with everything with everybody. That's not how humans are. But we've said there are some things like reducing road crash deaths by half. And some of us go as far as saying TZD, towards zero deaths.
Yes.
And Volvo has had the courage to say out loud, that's the standard we want to be held by. But it takes all of us doing these things to then create that global change, that reduction in deaths and injuries, or whatever the specific SDGs. And the way that you described it, the element that's crucial in all of that story is the story of the persistence and the tenacity of you and Reka, your wife, and the whole team. So there's an element of the short video, the stage, which is the genius of travelers and saying, hey, these lives that were stolen from us were stolen from the whole society. What would that person have done? What would Shreya have created and made for the world if somebody had not been driving distracted? And there's a genius in that question.
Yes.
That's like the genius that Earl Bakken, the inventor of the pacemaker and founder of Medtronic, he asked the question, hey, you got a pacemaker or a heart valve? You got extra years of your life. Exactly. What are you going to do to give back those extra years? And when we are facing the question of driving distracted, we need to be thinking, who might we injure or kill, and what will be lost to the planet and to the persons? And your work gives us all the opportunity, in this case, with assistance by travelers for sure,
yes,
to ask the questions that touch our heart.
And that is why, you know, some of the data that I showed, the amount of money that we are losing because of these crashes, we are talking about, you know, $500 million a year. That $500 million, even if we could not save all of it, majority of those crashes could be definitely avoided. A good number of those crashes that occur are, and that's the National Safety Council data that I showed you a little bit, are preventable. They have data on preventable crashes and non-preventable crashes.
Right.
Some of the crashes occurring, I don't want to name that state. In one of the states, the number of unpreventable crashes was as high as 93%. So think that. So that money, that $500 million could be used for environment, could be used for water, could be used for,
COVID vaccines. Yes, and I think what's been very important about your intervention in the SDG world is that often there's a conversation stopper, like, well, it's going to cost money to do A, B, and C. And I'm there and you're there saying, well, actually, if you don't have a car crash, do you know what one ambulance ride from the Mendota Bridge to HCMC costs in the middle of the night?
Yes.
You have any idea what these numbers are that you could be saving, that you could spend on vaccines for frontline workers and seniors in the whole planet? And so this is a contribution that a group who think about SDG 3.6 can make to the whole SDG community.
And the numbers, the dollar numbers that I gave you are coming from those who have died. Think of, and that is where the traveler comes in. Unfinished story of Shreya, 19 years, and she had probably another 70 years of life left for her if it was not shortened by a crash. In that 70, let's say, years, what and how much could she have contributed monetarily? And also, probably she would have become a great inventor of special type of technology. That's why I feel the model that we have developed here at the Shreya Foundation is transferable to other SDGs. And I could just name a few: technology and the things that really pop out immediately. But as I said, we want to map out levels down. That's where the actionable things are. And that's where we will discover, oh my God, this is the treasure. This is the gold mine which had never been touched. So I think financially, all these SDGs are money makers, not money spenders.
Well, this seems like a brilliant place to end this quarter's SDG Roundtable. I want to encourage everybody watching to go to the Shreya R. Dixit Foundation's website and go watch that amazing video stage and read about distraction-free life clubs in schools and many of the other things. And Vijay, you made a passionate plea for partnerships and contact and relationships with people working on other SDGs. And I know you mean that. So I want to underline that. Email Vijay, go to the website, contact us at Global Minnesota. But Vijay, thank you for sharing your story and your insights today. And also thank you for beginning to help us see how the genius of those who created the SDGs, making them apply to the whole planet, making them based fundamentally on partnerships, and making sure that all of us saw how they touched our own lives. Today, you've given us a master class in that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I just the last remarks, couple of them that I would like to make, if I may.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
So what I'm saying is that this particular opportunity that I was able to get was because I had some knowledge. There are other areas, multiply that by 16, and we are probably a pretty small Foundation in the state of Minnesota. There are a lot of other organizations working on similar things independent of each other. So when we collaborate, we actually start finding gold not in SDG, but in 16 other mines as well. And then I just want to say something stolen from that famous advertisement by the United States Army. He said, USA, I want you. So I want to use that particular
That's a great way to close out our day. You want us to be part of this larger SDG world. Thank you so much, Vijay. Thank you again. Bye, and thank you to everyone tuning in today. Go to the website, click on the video. It'll blow your minds. Thank you and goodbye.
Shreya, ShreyaDixit.org.
Thank you.